What's going on, guys? Ted from Immersion here, and it was brought to my attention that some of you may not know what Unearthed Arcana is. I talk about it every time, at least once a month, several times during several other videos, and I never can. It just completely didn't even cross my mind that you guys didn't know what I was talking about. So I figured, based on the comments that I received, it's time to tell you what is Unearthed Arcana. If you're an old D&D player from old previous editions, you may be thinking of maybe not this exact book, but a book right here. This is 3.5 Unearthed Arcana. It was a whole book that came out fairly early in the life cycle of 3.5. And basically, the general rule and kind of content you find in an Unearthed Arcana book is additional stuff, for lack of a better term. You're going to have, in 3.5, it was Paragon classes, I believe. It was variant features, so you wanted to be like a sorcerer, but you wanted to be a battle mage sorcerer, and it would be like you replace all of these things with these things. You want to be a barbarian, but you want to be a frenzied berserker, or rather than a rage, something like that, and it was all based off of that. Different things to alter the way the game is played and add more options for the players. An inexhaustible source of new rules to introduce to your D&D game. Inside are ideas, options, and alternatives to the standard D&D rules you can choose to fit your campaign's style of play. From variant classes, races, feats, and abilities, to alternate spellcasting systems, combat, and campaign options, Unearthed Arcana offers a tremendous array of material for you to explore. That was previous editions. So what is Unearthed Arcana today in 5th edition? Well, it is an article that's released once a month by the folks at Wizards of the Coast. It's been not since the very beginning of 5e. Let's see if we can go all the way back to the beginning and see when the very first one was. Is this the first? 2? Okay. D&D came out in 2014. So last February was the first Unearthed Arcana article, and that was about Eberron. And what are in these articles? Well, you're going to find alternative races. You're going to find alternative archetypes or subclasses for various existing classes. You might even find brand new classes, new items, rules to do other interesting things in your campaign. For instance, futuristic technology, new feats, things like that. So, why is this a big deal? Well, homebrew is, we're no stranger to homebrew. You play, any kind of tabletop game, people homebrew stuff all the time. So what's so great about Unearthed Arcana? Well, this is only once a month, so it's not a ton of stuff. And each month, this is something put out by the folks at Dungeons & Dragons. So this is as close to official homebrew as you're going to get. So, let's scroll down a little bit. So we've got Unearthed Arcana Eberron, that came out in February. Then we had Unearthed Arcana when Army Clashes here in the next March. Now this was all about siege combat and things like that. Then you have Modifying Classes. This came out in April. This one showed you how you could take an existing class and modify it into something else. This is also where they debut the Favored Soul Sorcerer and the Spellless Ranger, a ranger that doesn't get access to spellcasting and has other abilities instead. Waterborne Adventures came out that May of 15. This introduced the Minotaur race, the Mariner fighting style. This actually introduced the Swashbuckler, which is kind of the big deal of all this. The Swashbuckler that we saw published in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide was sort of a playtest thing here in this Unearthed Arcana Waterborne Adventures. It came out, it was in there, and it more or less remained completely unchanged to the final product. But the other point of Unearthed Arcana is to playtest new options and things like that Dungeons & Dragons and Wizards of the Coast are looking into possibly adding to the game. We're all no stranger to the fact that they don't want book bloat. They don't want you, 1 year into the thing having, into the release of the edition, 40 books, and you got to grab a source book here to get a feat from here and something from here, like we used to have to do in the olden days, which maybe you enjoyed. I kind of did personally, but That's not what this is about. This is to playtest to make sure things remain balanced. So, what they want you to do is they want you to take these Unearthed Arcana articles, and they want you to take these classes and these races, and they want you to sit down and play with them, and tell them what you think. After an Unearthed Arcana article is released, the end of that month, pretty much, they release a survey. And the survey is basically, what did you think about all of the things in the Unearthed Arcana? You respond. Sometimes there's about other stuff, and then the next month they kind of give you the results about where things landed and how people felt about it, what was good, what was bad, what needed to be changed. And that leads to these kind of things. Again, Swashbuckler was published. We might be seeing some new stuff in Volo's Guide to Monsters. We don't know. But we do know, as of the survey results from just this past week, that they are working on a major rule expansion for 5th edition. So some other source book that is just rules and possibly new classes, new feats, things like that, because that was in a reference to the feat article. So the only problem with it is Unearthed Arcana is not Adventure League allowable, so it's technically not official in any capacity. So in any kind of official D&D tournaments, or not tournaments, but conventions and things like that, you can't use an Unearthed Arcana article. But, like I said, in my experience, about 90% of DMs will allow anything that's from Unearthed Arcana, because it's technically published by Wizards. And by that I mean Wizards of the Coast, not actual Wizards. Alright, so let's keep moving on. Variant rules for, what was this one? From June of 2008. This was... what? Oh, this was ways to change the vitality rolls, custom alignments, things like that to add variation to your game to kind of differ from the norm of the way D&D is played. So that was through June of last year, and we'll just briefly touch on these, and I'll tell you what they all mean. So, in July of 2015, we got the Awakened Mystic. This was the step into psionics. This was something new we haven't seen in 5th edition. You guys might be familiar with it from previous, but this was our first step into psionics. Then, in August of last year, we got Modern Magic. This was kind of taking Dungeons & Dragons and how you could port it to a modern sci-fi setting. You see this kind of cyborg chick here and the kind of battle armor and things like that. And then, right here, this was September of last year. Now, you see there's a gap. Oh, no, there isn't a gap yet. September of last year, they tried to do a Ranger update. This was them recognizing that we feel that the Ranger is underpowered in comparison to other things in 5th edition. So they made this kind of spirit-based Ranger. I think it was way OP. They got an extra... the amount of one-level dips that would be in Ranger would be insane. They got a whole extra turn. Their hit dice was 2d6, and they got Dex and Constitution saves. It was crazy. Not worth it. And obviously they've abandoned that, and we'll talk about that in a sec. Prestige classes and rune magic. Here in October... Now there's no skip here either. In October of last year, this introduced the first prestige class concept for 5th edition. Prestige classes, if you're unfamiliar, were things that have existed in previous editions where you kind of enter into a mini class when you reach certain requirements. It might be you have to have proficiency in Arcana and Acrobatics, and you need to be at least 5th level, and your Dexterity needs to be at least 15. And then that will let you give up on your current class and go into this prestige class that might only be 5 levels long that lets you get access to some cool stuff. This is a really cool way they used to do things in previous editions to allow you to kind of take one existing character and maybe specialize in something. They've kind of taken some of that away by molding the archetypes into the classes. Most of the archetypes that we see were prestige classes. Like Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster were prestige classes in previous editions. Now they're part of the core class. Light, Dark, and Underdark. This introduced a new attempt at a Ranger archetype, a new Sorcerer, a Shadow-based Sorcerer, and probably the best Warlock in the game, the Undying Light Warlock, which is a Warlock of the positive plane that focuses on Radiant Energy. The reason you want to do this is with a 1-level dip into this Warlock, You can add your charisma modifier to any fire or radiant damage you deal with spells. Spirit Guardians, Fireball, Sacred Flame, all these things. Green Flame Blade. Get a ton of extra utility when you take 1 level dip in this class. That was November, and then that Old Black Magic came out last December. This was all about tieflings. This was to show this edition's tieflings are more, I want to say, devil-based or demon-based, and this kind of shows you back to previous editions before the whole Toro 13, Briseis Kakistos, Asmodeus pact, where all tieflings kind of follow in his image, and tieflings had different variations where they had cloven hooves and different horns and different skin colors and wings and things like that. This kind of it shows you the difference between an infernal tiefling and an abyssal tiefling, and also adds some cool demon summoning spells. Then it goes to Kits of Old. This was January of last year. This kind of pulled on the old AD&D 2E kit system, and this was new options for bards and fighters. There was a College of the Sword bard, kind of a rogue bard combination class, a cavalier fighter, things like that. I think there was a scout as well. This is where things started to change. This was in March. They skipped February, and then in March, or this was January, they skipped February, and then in March, they started doing the DM's Guild review. This got a lot of backlash because they didn't give us new content. They reviewed previous content published on the Dungeon Masters Guild, which is fine, but we were expecting to a certain style of living of getting our new Unearthed Arcana every month. So that happened in March. Then, in June, they released feats, which there was ones in between there. That's wrong. Anyway, this isn't all the articles, so I don't know why this, but there were more. Then in this past June, they released feats, which was the first expansion to new feats we've seen in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. They added 4 or 5 new weapon-based feats, and then 4 tool-based feats. There was one that is not here, which added the kind of Thurge Arcane Tradition, which was like a Mystic Thurge class. That was just last month. And a new, an Astral kind of based Warlock. One of the previous ones, they did revisit the Psionic class I was telling you about. They revisited it and tweaked it to make it better. So that was a cool concept. And they also did another Dungeon Master Guild Spotlight video, or article, and then they stopped doing that and are now including DM's Guild Spotlights in the Dragon Plus articles. And that leads up to today, which I'm going to be doing a separate video on. Normally, the reason I actually started doing weekly D&D updates was because of Unearthed Arcana, because a lot of people didn't know that they were coming out, so I started doing these videos once a week to let people know what exists and what's out there. Normally, I would let this be covered under its weekly D&D update at the end of this week, but I'm going to be doing a full separate video on the Ranger Revised. As of earlier today, Wizards of the Coast released an article where they, an Unearthed Arcana article where they kind of basically said, we get it, Ranger needs some help. Here's our take at a playtest tweakable version of a completely revised Ranger. They do go on to say things like, if you were to playing in Adventure League, once this becomes published in an official source book, it will be Adventure League legal, but you'll have the option to play this Ranger or the previous Ranger in the player's handbook. So, anyway, guys, I hope that was a little bit long-winded, but I hope that explains to you what Unearthed Arcana is. A quick TLDR is a monthly article released by Wizards of the Coast on their website that adds new playtest content for 5e in the most official capacity that homebrew can be. So, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't know what Unearthed Arcana is, I hope this helped. I'll link this tag here in the description, even though, again, it doesn't have everything. So, anyway, guys, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.